Hi everyone, my name is Kartik and my channel is about mental models. I hope you're enjoying my videos. If you are, then please subscribe to my channel, and as always, please like and share this video with everyone you know. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Simpson's paradox. Simpson's paradox is a phenomenon where even though a certain trend appears in different groups of data, when these different groups are combined, the trend reverses or even disappears. This also applies vice versa. Now, I find this mental model very interesting because when I think about it, this fact seems sort of counterintuitive. When I look at groups of data, I see a trend, but when I combine everything, the trend goes the other way around. It seems counterintuitive. And this message of reversing or disappearing trends is what I want to communicate to you all in this video. Now, you might think this is quite hard to visualize, so let me give you an example as follows. So we have four graphs, and each one of these graphs has sort of plots of data, and they all somewhat show a similar trend, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. They all sort of have this increasing trend. They're all going in the same direction. But when I'll do it over on this side, when we combine the four plots of data, what we actually end up seeing when they're put together is we see something like so. We see when we combine the plots, something like that. And so the actual trend we are seeing on this graph is a negative one. So here is sort of like the yellow graph's data. Then you've got the sort of the orange one. Then you've got the red one. And I deliberately, and then finally you've got the green one. And I deliberately didn't sort of colour the dots in their respective colours on this side because I wanted to show you that data is data. And when put together, if we're not actively looking for this, we won't see it. We'll just see a negative trend. But this is how, when data is in isolation, it gives you a certain trend, but when it's combined together, it gives you a different trend, or even the trend might just disappear completely. But this is a very sort of vivid example, and that's why I wanted to showcase this. This is what it looks like. This is how you visualize it. Now, this is all very good to know, but let's take a small step back, because you're probably thinking, well, why do I need to know this? As I'm sure you all know by now, mental models are tools, frameworks, concepts to help us understand and interact with the world around us, and the idea is to get to a positive and or intended outcome. So from the perspective of a mental model, let's say you have the situation where a certain proposal works well when you test it a few times with different groups of people that are affected by the proposal. And you may think that it will provide a good outcome to everyone. So sort of this scenario, you test it a few times and you can see, okay, this is working well. And it might provide a good outcome when sort of you roll it out to everyone. However, when the full population is combined, sort of this example here, the positive outcome disappears. I mean, in this case, you're getting a negative outcome, but let's just say the positive outcome disappears, and the proposal does not really work. This is one case of Simpson's paradox, and this is an easily observable case where you sort of take some samples and you think, this is working, but then when you roll it out to everyone, you find problems that actually, when you were testing it in with groups of people or in isolated situations, you didn't come across those nuances, those problems. And so this is an easily observable, sort of an easy case to sort of conceptualize in your mind that, I've come across this. However, the less observable scenario, so this is one valid scenario. Another less observable scenario is, let's say you trial something on what you think is the population that you're testing it on. You think that what you're testing it on is the entire population, and it gives you a positive outcome. And so your thought process is, well, I've done this. I'm sort of seeing, let's say this is the number of problems faced and the amount of the proposal that is trialed. So the more we do the trials, we see that the problems decrease. So we're sort of thinking this proposal actually on the population looks really good. And so the thought process, going back to that, and the observation is that because this trial is working well on the population, there is nothing further to do. We can just see that it's all really well and good. But, and this is a big but because we've seen this and we know about this, just because something works well or works on the population doesn't necessarily mean it will have the same outcome with the different groups of people in isolation. And this is a big factor in politics, public policy, and even clinical trials. The data may show that there is a positive outcome, but there could be pockets or groups of people and or those with certain demographics that are actually negatively affected. And so you get, it's almost the reverse, but it's harder to see because you think you've caught everyone, and generally everyone is looking good. In isolation, there are pockets of people that are actually affected negatively, and it's the more we roll out the trial or whatever the proposal is, the number of problems is actually increasing in that little demographic or in that pocket or grouping of people. And so the paradox, and this is not observable, this is less observable or probably something that we don't even think about. And so the paradox therefore reminds us to always dig deeper into the underlying factors in order to get a true understanding of your data before making decisions based on numbers alone. This is the key point. Now, you might ask why this can happen in reality. The reasons why this happens is as follows. So, unequal group sizes. The number of items in each data grouping can differ dramatically. That's one. Another one, confounding variables. Confounding variables are factors that can distort the relationship between two variables being studied, such as external factors being unevenly distributed in the different groups, and therefore they take an effect on the overall population. The key characteristic of confounding variables is that they influence both the variable being studied and the outcome. They can be hidden, so not obvious and observable, without further investigation, and confounding variables can flip a trend. This trend flip characteristic is something that we can sort of see in the data from here to here. So confounding variables has this characteristic. And thirdly, aggregation bias. It's a little bit underrated, but I think this is quite important. This bias is when data is aggregated, the nuance, so when we get to this stage, when data is aggregated, the nuances of subgroups can be obscured. So here we can sort of see very clearly the trend going in the upward direction, but when we sort of take this and put it here, and if I remove all these sort of colorful outlines, that data will be lost in all the other data. So the nuance of that subgroup is actually being obscured. This means that they only reveal themselves when sort of either taken in isolation or the other way around, where you might not see any sort of trend in the full population and in isolation, or the other way around. So they can only be seen, they only reveal themselves when combined with other sets of data, the nuances that is. But in isolation, you might not think there is anything remarkable, or in groups, you might not think there's anything remarkable. It's sort of, one might not show anything, but the other will, or this might not show anything, but the other will. And so that's what I'm trying to get to here with the aggregation bias. Ultimately, so all of that is very important to know, but ultimately, in conclusion, the paradox can lead us to incorrect conclusions. And based on those incorrect conclusions, poorer outcomes. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So how can we overcome this situation? Well, number one is by analyzing data, by dividing the population into subgroups based on specific characteristics, and that is called stratifying, if I can spell it, stratifying or stratification. So that is quite important. Number two, as we saw, confounding variables are an important factor. So we need to be able to adjust for confounding variables, and we do that by using statistical methods, which I'm not going to go into because this is not a maths class. And this, by adjusting for confounding variables, this can lead to more accurate interpretations. And number three, we need to understand causal relationships. We need to understand causal relationships between variables. In other words, understanding how one event or variable directly influences or causes another variable. Now, this can be difficult, or this is difficult, should I say, but it can really help. This third point can really help to address this paradox. And so these are sort of some of the ways we can sort of overcome or address this situation that we're seeing here. So to conclude, I want to highlight the key learning from this video, as this is important, and that is that we must be conscious to always dig deeper into the underlying factors in order to get a true understanding of something before making any decisions. And that's what it's about. Just because what is being observed looks good doesn't mean that in isolation every sort of data set will follow the same trend and will be affected in the same equally positive way, and we must be mindful of that. Now you might be thinking, well, actually it's going to be really hard to go through each and everything, every characteristic, and sort of, you know, adjusting for that. It is hard, it's not easy, but this is something we must be mindful, and it sort of goes back to a cost versus benefit scenario as well, but we must be at least mindful not to take things in isolation or things in aggregate at face value. And that is Simpson's paradox, and that's all for this video. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then please check out my earlier videos flashing on screen now. I'm sure you will like them too, and I will see you in the next video with another mental model. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.